I awoke to darkness, which itself wasn't surprising since I had fallen asleep just as the sun was going down. What was surprising, what was vaguely concerning, was the nature of the darkness. Its apparent density, its widespread occupation of my ordinarily ambiently lit living room. I'd fallen asleep on my couch facing away from the TV, which I'd left on, tuned to some dead channel. But upon waking, my darkened vision showed the ceiling. A dim circle, the only evidence of the ceiling fan thereon. Something had drawn me out of my dreamless sleep and caused me to half turn in the process of waking, as if I'd been called. Something had snuffed out the lights of the various devices throughout the open space, replacing them with an almost preternatural darkness. In any other situation, I would have just gotten up, turned on the lights, and done a little investigating, perhaps finding that I had been awakened by a forgotten alarm or some louder-than-usual sound from one of the tenants above or below me. But lying there, staring up at the canvas of black that was my ceiling, I felt it absolutely imperative that I not get up. That I not even turn my gaze away from the barely discernible fan. The immediacy and severity of this feeling, this disinclination to do anything but lie there, was itself alarming. I listened, the thought coming to me that someone had broken in and my body was simply responding to its primal programming of predatory avoidance. But I heard nothing. That is, nothing unusual. They were only the typical sounds of apartment living, most of which I had grown accustomed to months ago. Still, anxiety took hold within me, a small panic mounting as my mind failed to reconcile the feeling of vulnerability with the lack of evidence for a hostile presence. My physical senses told me nothing, and yet instinct, intuition, and whatever else constitutes more abstract sensory perception told me that I was in danger, that there was something very near, something that would, upon noticing my activity, inflict unthinkable violence upon me. Seconds passed, minutes, and I eventually realized that I was feeling unwell. It began as a sensation not entirely dissimilar to indigestion, but then quickly retweaked itself so that it manifested as something more cardiac. I felt my heart flutter and pound within my chest, and I sensed somehow, in this hyper-aware state, my body grew more vascular. The veins pressing against my skin as if the blood flowing through them had developed a fluidic sentience and wanted out. This alarming feeling waned a little after a few tension-filled moments, but again evolved into a new sensation, this time localized entirely within my head. A migraine, sudden and fierce, came to me, and had I not been so utterly terrified of detection, I would have cried out and rolled onto the floor. Instead, as subtly as I could, I buried the back of my head into the couch cushion as if I could somehow grind out the pain. All the while keeping my eyes trained on that featureless swath of black above. Something was happening to me. A process that almost felt like some highly invasive probing or upwards traveling scan, an increasingly uncomfortable evaluation of my physiology. When the migraine subsided and I was left a sweating, tremulous mess, I decided that I could not mentally withstand another episode like that. With immeasurably slow movements, I inched my head so that by pressing my eyes to the very edge of their sockets, I could gaze towards the coffee table, which sat between the couch and the TV. Even these minute and glacially undertaken motions had drawn the attention of previously unseen things. Just when my right eye caught sight of it, it rose from its perch on the coffee table, rearing up in malignant glory and amidst the fulsome darkness. I managed to flick my eyes away immediately, but I had seen it, and in doing so had brought its full attention upon me. The subsequent feeling of dread, the sheer implacable terror that came upon me, the most demon-haunted, phobia-filled nightmares can scarcely compare to that single, short-lived instance of monstrosity. It was as if I had gazed upon Satan himself, orating before his undivine legions of pandemonium. When my face turned back towards the ceiling, I stared fixated, as one petrified by a Medusian gaze, rendered entirely still in my inexpressible terror, and not only sensed the thing looking at me, observing me with its demonian and inscrutable gaze, but felt on a deep spiritual level its close presence, the titanic inhumanity of it. Had there been others there with me, I'm sure they would have felt the same. Such a loathsome and deeply supernatural thing could not exist amongst the sane and mundane without affecting them in some way. It emanated evil. I don't know how much time passed before I lost it. Maybe seconds, maybe hours. One moment I was lying there, steeping in darkness, my body pitifully flailing to maintain any worthwhile degree of homeostasis in the presence of this ultra-heinous entity. And the next I was screaming, crying, spurting and babbling hysterically, insensibly, like a coat-restrained lunatic shrieking in the back of some asylum. I just couldn't take it anymore. My mind not equipped to handle being in the proximity of something so existentially inimical to human nature. What silenced me, what curbed my madness, has kept me incurably awake since, was not the bite or claw marks of some pit-escaped fiend. I wasn't attacked. Not in a way I can reasonably, accurately articulate. What could have been the height of, or a dip in my mania, a subtle yet profoundly terrifying thing happened. My ceiling blinked. In a moment of acute mind-collapsing despair, I realized that I had not been staring at my ceiling fan. The thing that I'd mistaken for it was actually an eye. Black and massive, into which I'd been desperately staring for hours. As if in its tenebrous lens I'd find salvation from the lesser nightmare perched beside me. An instinctual glance, a knee-jerked reaction of fear, rightward showed the unwholesome gargoylean horrors still there on the coffee table, but only then did I realize that it was joined with the coffee table, and it joined with the carpet, and the TV behind them both, and everything else minimally observable in the essentially lightless room. The room was so dark, not because of some unprecedentedly dark night, but because something had covered the walls and floors so totally that it simply appeared that way. I was not enshrouded, but encased. Bottled up inside something larger than life, blacker than space. For hours I had lain awake in the maw, the gullet or bowels of some immense. The cessation of my screams marked the thankfully temporary implosion of my mind. I didn't move or even blink for hours, till finally, for some reasons unknowable to me, the thing receded into whatever void or dimensional abscess it had come from, and light arrived not long after, filled the room, returning a faint sense of normalcy to the world. But the dread remained. My despair lingered. The horror of that omnipresent affront to sanity remained within the forefront of my psyche, keeping me numb and paralyzed. I had always enjoyed sleep. I looked forward to it pretty much from the moment I began my day. But now, having seen what happened during the hours when the mind and the body are at their most vulnerable, when reality is, for whatever reason, malleable, I don't think I'll ever again look forward to the advent of night. Now I dread it. I have no notions left of sanity. I no longer hold any illusions about personal safety. Eldritch, obscene things can, on a whim, enter into our reality and unravel our minds. And there is nothing we can do about it. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching today's video, or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. If you're listening on the podcast, then hey, thank you for subscribing to the podcast. If you're not watching on the podcast or watching on YouTube, I'd appreciate if you subscribe to the YouTube, because both are very good. They're important to me. And as always, I want to give a huge thank you out to everybody who's out there on the Patreon, patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta, and to everybody who's already a part of it and even giving just $1. Thank you guys so much for making it possible for me to be able to continue to do this and even be able to get some exclusive stories that we only have here on the channel and you can't find anywhere else. So a big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Stephanie Butler, Reaper61167, Bobby Karman, Tristain Pelton, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, Atomaurus, Grand Moth the Milky, Big Smoke 369, Michael Mcivor, Captain Scurvy, SaltyIrishPoet, Estebean, Brayden Morris, Nate Kuhl, HorrorFan1212, hourminsec Time, Kyle Reznak, David Martin, scare-ington the unkempt, Robert Malcolm, Angelus, Spanky, Snoochie Boochies, Seclude, Lupita Galvan, That Creepy Chick, Tyler Fletcher, Merxenum, Red Shadowcat, Xavier the Cheyenne, Demix, Shawn Cadieu-baker, 6 Gay Rats in a Trenchcoat, Turtleman, Rob Like Sharp Thing, Chaos Arts, Cryolinian, Xavier Graffius, Lord Life's Best, Goreng Trimagasi, Maria Walker, Emily Mitchell, Crazy Kid, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Ika Limchok, Dirt Diver 030, Matt Bach, Voice of Sand, Coffee Zombie, Hidden Tiger, Shelly J, Jeremy H, Psychomel, Nana, Deleted Account, Melted Lake, Tully Sue, William King, David Miver, Michael Ortiz, Satanic Aries, Bardo Hawk 764, Lambda M98, Harley, Sachi Suzaku, Cronut 509, Kaylee Ambrose, Suji Campbell, Stricket, Azarine Fox, Freddy Krueger, Happy Birthday Jason Wilson, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Hades Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Benjamin Welvert, Here with the Sloth, Fester's Lampshade, Sky Harbor, Nico Kyle, Rafael Rodriguez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, and Corey Kenship. My goodness, the list is getting long. But hey, I appreciate all of you. And everybody down in the description, and everybody who's a part of the Patreon, period. Thank you guys so much for making this happen, for getting treats for Hercules and Hylas, and helping me keep the lights on around here. And to everybody who watches and subs and likes and leaves comments and does all those things, sweet dreams.